What's happening, everyone? My name is James Lynch, and this is the Fanatics View Hockey Show. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you guys have any questions, post them in the chat. I'll get to every single one of them I can. We got a lot to get into. A lot has happened over the last week. Of course, we do this show every Wednesday. But before I get into everything, make sure you hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, and hit that notification bell. Really helps out the channel a lot. My guy Taylor's putting on post and pre-game coverage on this channel every single day, so you want to be tuning into that and get all the updates on everything that's going on. So let me know what you guys want to talk about. Obviously, we got to get into this JT Miller trade. I know it happened on Friday, but we're already seeing the effects of that trade play out with both the New York Rangers and the Vancouver Canucks. We'll talk about that in a sec, but like we usually do on the show, let's start first with some of the action that took place last night. There were a lot of games going on. I'm not going to go through all of them in depth, but I do think it's worth discussing some of the outcomes from last night, and then we'll get into the JT Miller stuff because that was a big move that happened Friday night. And I'll tell you the whole story about how I found out about it too, because I was out and about, and then I saw everything sort of come in. But anyways, let's start first with the Capitals. 6-3 over the Panthers. Alex Ovechkin now, I think 17 goals left to break Wayne Gretzky's record, or tie it, I should say. So really, really big game for Ovechkin. I believe he got... how many goals did he get? Yeah, he just got the one goal last night, but I think he's on pace. If I read correctly, he's on pace for 14 goals for the rest of the season. We'll see if he can hit 17 this year. That would be incredible. So we'll keep an eye on that for sure. But the Capitals win big. 35-11-7 overall is their record. Very impressive there for the Caps as they continue to surprise a lot of people this year. Again, I think they're comfortably in a good spot in the Eastern Conference. We'll get to the standings a little bit later. The Devils taking out the Penguins 3-2. Wasn't easy. Pittsburgh made this a close game. Obviously, Pittsburgh was involved in that trade with Vancouver last week too. We'll talk about that in a little bit. The Lightning beating the Ottawa Senators. The Senators have been quite solid. I watched that game on Monday with them in Nashville. Really good performance there. How about Adam Gaudette for the Senators? This was a player that I'm very familiar with here in Vancouver. He played with the Canucks for a few seasons, bounced around a little bit, but really has found a home with Ottawa, and that's been a nice story. But ultimately, they did lose to the Lightning here. Again, we'll look at the standings in a second. The Sabres beating the Blue Jackets. That's a big win for Buffalo, although I think they're still on the outside looking in. The Bruins beating the Minnesota Wild. Bruins at home, favored to win, but the Minnesota Wild thought would have put up a little bit better of a fight. Not much offense at all, with the Bruins getting the win there. How about the Islanders upsetting the Golden Knights as well? The Islanders at home there. The Jets beating the Hurricanes. Good test for both teams here. Carolina not able to get a goal here. Their big acquisition a few weeks ago, Mikko Rantanen, held off the score sheet in this one. The Oilers beating the Blues. The Oilers were actually down in this game, if I'm not mistaken. They were down. Oh no, sorry. Yeah, they were down 2-1 in the third, and then ended up winning in overtime. So big win there for Edmonton. They improved to 33-16-4. And you look on the end here, Stuart Skinner, a bit of a quiet night there, just 20 saves on 22 shots, while on the other end, 35 saves there for Jordan Binnington, 38 shots. So the Blues giving up a lot of shots in that one, pretty likely with the type of offensive firepower that the Edmonton Oilers have. Maple Leafs 6-3 over the Flames. William Nylander coming home to Calgary and getting a hat trick in this one, so that was very impressive. The Leafs looking good there. Calgary still fighting for their playoff lives, just like the Canucks. So Calgary loses the key game there. Utah beating the Flyers 3-2. The Red Wings beating the Kraken 5-4. I watched this game last night. The Avalanche, the Canucks. Canucks look great. Really, really good performance. This looks like the team that was playing last year. One of the things I was texting with some of my friends last night was even just small things like the passing is just so much better now. Like they're not panicking, they're controlled. We're seeing more breakouts. That's something that Canucks fans have been dying to see for the last little bit. Are not just the typical dump and chase, players actually moving into the offensive zone, or moving into the offensive zone and actually doing something with it. And we'll talk about some of the acquisitions, like I said in a second here, about the JT Miller trade. But the Canucks look solid. They deserved the win last night, and they also had really good goaltending from Thatcher Demko, who gets a shutout. I believe it's the first shutout he's had since being back, so really well deserved there for Thatcher Demko. Again, we'll circle back on the Canucks a second. And I know we talk about the Canucks a lot on here, but they have been sort of the talk of the town the last couple of weeks with the old JT Miller, Elias Pettersson situation. The Ducks upsetting the Stars as well. What's going on in Dallas? They've lost a few games now. Should not be losing to Anaheim. And then the Montreal Canadiens taking out the San Jose Sharks. Canadiens still in a good position there. And let's have a quick look at the NHL standings right now after everything from last night. We'll also talk a bit about tonight's games as well too. Have a look at that. But if you look right now in the conference, leading the way here, like I mentioned, the Washington Capitals in first place, and you got the Tampa Bay Lightning in 8th. Bruins still on the outside looking in. Bruins have, obviously Tampa has some games in hand here, so they're tied there technically. But if you go off the points percentage here, you've got, what is it? I think the Red Wings are actually if you're going off the points percentage, Red Wings are actually in a playoff position. So yeah, very interesting to see how this is unfolding in the East. It's going to be a bit of a race here. Again, not a huge gap here. If you look at it there, 55, 57, 59 to 60. Granted, there's some games in hands there. Montreal has slipped a little bit. They are down to 53 games played, 57 points. And then you look at the Rangers, who just acquired JT Miller. They need a lot. They got to be winning their games going forward. So that's one to keep an eye on. And then in the West, you still got Winnipeg, Edmonton, Dallas. Like I said, slipped a little bit. So is Vegas. Vegas has slipped a few notches. Dallas actually has a game in hand over Vegas. Vegas now in 4th spot. Minnesota, bad news about Kaprizov being injured. We talked about that last week. So they've slipped a bit. Colorado looking a little bit better. The Kings have not been playing well. They did win the other night. And then you've got this sort of, this three-way situation, right? So you've got the Canucks and Flames have played the exact same amount of games. They're dead tied. I think goal differential-wise, Calgary would get in. Actually, no, I think Canucks would get in. I'm not sure. I have to double check the math on that one, but very close there. And then there's a bit of a drop off with Utah there. You got Utah, St. Louis, Anaheim, Seattle, Nashville, Chicago. I'm surprised Nashville hasn't made a lot of moves. I mean, they're pretty much out of it right now. So it's kind of interesting to see where things have gone for the Predators this season. I think at this point, you pretty much have to start looking at selling, I would think, because they're not going to make the playoffs by any means. So we'll see what happens there. What else was I going to mention? Yeah, let's get to the trade. Most of you already know it anyways. I just want to give you guys my thoughts on this. Again, I know this is from Friday. And by the way, I see we got a comment here. I thought you just posted the interviews. No, we do the show every Wednesday. I'm on here. My name is James Lynch. We do the hockey show every Wednesday. It's an interactive show where we basically, I answer your questions. We talk some hockey for an hour. So there we go. Let's look at the Miller trade right now. Here's the full trade right now. So you can see it there. JT Miller, Eric Brandstrom, and Jackson Dorrington, who I have no idea who that is. Eric Brandstrom. So if you remember, Eric Brandstrom was acquired by the Canucks by Colorado for basically to dump Tucker Poolman's contract. Tucker Poolman is basically retired. He's been on the books for the Canucks the last couple seasons. It's one of those situations where he won't retire because he won't collect his paycheck. So he's still on the books for the Canucks. Canucks were able to dump Tucker Poolman's salary to Colorado. In return, they got Eric Brandstrom, who they just signed in the offseason. Now, Brandstrom, if you remember, was in that trade with Mark Stone a couple of years back. Vegas had drafted him. He went to Ottawa and had some success in Ottawa, but ultimately the Sens decided not to bring him back. He comes to Vancouver, had some good play with Vancouver, but ultimately could not stay in the lineup for Rick Tocchet. And so he's included in this deal. And then obviously JT Miller gets traded. So a couple things. First, people have to remember that JT Miller did have a no trade clause. So this was his choice as well to leave and go to the New York Rangers, the same team that drafted him. And then going the other way, you got Philip Cheadle, Victor Mancini, and a top 3 protected first round pick, which the Canucks have already traded to Pittsburgh. We'll go over that trade in a second. But look, I saw a lot of outrage, on social media on Friday night when this trade was first made. I defended this. I think this is about as good as it's going to get. The thing that people have to remember are a couple things. First and foremost, JT Miller's 32 years old. So he's on an 8-year deal. Players that are over, 28, typically they're on the decline. I know Miller's got a few good seasons left in him probably, and, he's coming off a 100-point season. And I know you look at it on paper and you're like, they just traded a 100-point guy for, a first-round pick and a couple, 2 prospects, so to speak, because I guess Cheadle isn't really a prospect. He was more of a third-line guy. But I think what people got to realize is, like, Miller's 32 and he's got term. The Canucks did not have to eat any salary on this trade. And here's the thing that I think people are losing sight of, because obviously, Cheadle has worked out great. He definitely has been playing well his first 2 games with the Canucks. He scored in the first game for the Canucks the other night against Detroit. There's concerns with his health. Obviously, he did not play a ton last year. He played 10 games due to concussion issues. That's always a liability. But what I think people are forgetting here is one of the most valuable assets in the NHL, and I talk about this every week, is cap space. So even if for some reason Cheadle doesn't work out, and let's say the Canucks want to go their separate ways after his contract's up, which is in a couple of years, you have all that cap space now. The Canucks can be players. They can essentially replace a JT Miller in free agency or via trade, because you're losing $8 million off your book. Now, I know people will also say, well, hey, James, the cap's going up. $8 million is a bargain. That's true, but he's also 32, JT Miller, that is. The other thing that people have to remember is that Canucks were trading from a point of weakness. So, and the point of weakness was Miller, from every team he's been on, from the Rangers the first stint, Tampa Bay the second stint, and now the Canucks, there's been locker room issues. Teams do factor that in. So you bring a player in, you might get the 100 points, but that might disrupt the locker room. So that, again, depleted his value. I think like most Canucks fans, it would have been great to get like a Braden Schneider or Alexei Lafreniere or one of these big names from the Rangers, but ultimately they were able to, get that out of the Canucks. I think part of the holdup in this deal was which prospect would go back. Everything I'm reading and seeing is Victor Mancini looks like a very solid prospect. He's a big guy. He actually made the Rangers opening lineup at the beginning of the season. So I think there's some potential there with him as well, even if Cheadle for some reason doesn't work out. So I think the trade was a win. You already see, I know it's 2 games and people are going to say, what are you talking about, James? But this looks like a different team. It really does. They like I said, the passing last night was really solid. Again, there's been more push. There's more players skating with the puck. They look more organized. And by the way, the Canucks won last night without Quinn Hughes. They lost the other night against Detroit without Quinn Hughes as well in a game that they should have won. This looks like there's a big elephant out of the room now. And I'm not saying it's all on Miller, but maybe just switching things up in general was what the Canucks needed. Because it's not just that they got Cheadle for JT Miller. You're getting Drew O'Connor as well in this trade too, which we'll mention the Pittsburgh trade in a second. But there's some pieces there for the Canucks that seem to fit better than the current mix that was there. So I'm happy with it. Again, at the very least, even if nothing here works out with the Rangers in this trade, you've got the cap space to fix that mistake and potentially try and find someone else to replace JT Miller. So I think the trade's fine. Considering what the Canucks were dealing with, I think it's a totally fine trade. Was it a home run? No, but it was a decent trade. Now, the trade that went the other way, and we'll discuss this here quickly. So it was the trade between the Vancouver Canucks and the Pittsburgh Penguins. So this trade, so the same night. So again, Friday I'm at a family dinner with friends and all that. Actually, it wasn't a family dinner; it was like a friends dinner. And I see that Miller's traded, and everyone's freaking out. And we had heard this before. This was a couple of weeks. Actually, I think it was the night of the night that the Rangers scratched a bunch of their prospects. It was a couple weeks back. You thought that the Miller trade was going to happen. Elliot Friedman comes out and it's like JT Miller's getting traded. I think it was him or Sarah Valley. I can't remember, but they're basically like, yeah, Miller's out. So it's like, okay, finally we're getting a trade. And then honestly, the return was kind of what I expected. Then shortly after, the Canucks then flip that first round pick they got from the Rangers. We don't have a nice graphic up here, but you can read it here. Marcus Pettersson, defenseman, and Drew O'Connor were traded to the Vancouver Canucks by the Pittsburgh Penguins for forward Danton Hyman and defenseman Vinny Desharnais. Pittsburgh also received forward prospect Melvin Firmstrom and a conditional first-round pick in the 2025 draft, which Vancouver had acquired earlier in the day in the forward that sent JT Miller to the New York Rangers. Okay, so I think like a lot of people, when the Canucks traded that first-round pick, because that's a valuable asset to have, the first-round pick. I think a lot of people are like, man, like you already gave it up. Now, look, the Canucks have done this before. If you remember the trade that the Canucks made for Bo Horvat, they got a first-round pick in that deal. Going back the other way was Anthony Beauvillier, Atu Ratu. But they ended up taking, they got a couple first-round picks out of it with Bo Horvat. They then flipped that first-round pick later, a few months later, to Detroit to get Filip Hronek. That's worked out quite well. Hronek's been a mainstay on the back end for Vancouver. So they do the same thing here with Marcus Pettersson. Now, there's going to be people as well. I've seen people criticize this being like, why would you give up a first round pick for Marcus Pettersson when he's an unrestricted free agent? You have to imagine with the history that, Vancouver's management has. Patrick Alvin and Jim Rutherford, both previously with the Pittsburgh Penguins management. They're familiar with him. In fact, Jim Rutherford actually traded for Marcus Pettersson when he was in Pittsburgh. You got to think they're confident about re-signing him. Now, people are saying first round pick for Marcus Pettersson. He hasn't really lit the world on fire. That's the premium right now for defensemen. If you look at all the trades that have happened this year with defensemen, Jernick, there's so many that have happened this year. They are a high, heavy price. So that's what you're paying for a premium defenseman. With the Canucks, the reason they do this now and why I think it makes sense is you get ahead of this. You don't wait till free agency where maybe you're going to have to pay more and get outbid for Marcus Pettersson's services. The biggest weakness for the Canucks this season has been on their back end. The defensive play has not been good outside of Quinn Hughes and Filip Hronek. It hasn't been very good. I mean, Tyler Myers is playing a bit better. Carson Soucy's having a terrible season. So you needed some stability, and that's what Pettersson brings. And you're already seeing that the first couple games that Pettersson's been playing. There's not that sense of panic. Vinny Desharnais was going the other way. The Canucks brought him in from Edmonton thinking this was a player that they could, rehabilitate, so to speak, and he could be someone that they could mold into the type of defenseman they want. It hasn't worked out. He's been a liability, as has Noah Juleson, as has Soucy. There's been a lot of unstable defensive play, and that's why the Canucks haven't won a lot of games this year. So you're not getting an offensive defenseman here necessarily in Marcus Pettersson, but what you are getting is someone you can trust on the back end, and the Canucks are comfortable with that. Drew O'Connor going the other way. A lot of people are comparing him to Ilya Mikheyev, who didn't last too long with the Canucks, and they ended up trading him because same sort of thing. He's a speedy forward who, adds some energy to your line, but also is not maybe the best defensively. We've already seen in the first couple games, Drew O'Connor skating with the puck. Rick Tocchet already likes him. So hopefully that works out. Again, same deal. Drew O'Connor, I believe, a UFA as well. So the Canucks got to sign these players, and if they don't, then again, I look at it this differently from other people where it's like, okay, you don't re-sign these players. There's still, cap room that you can use to get other players as well. Like, cap space is so valuable. Look how many teams are up against the cap. I think the fact that you have the Canucks that have a bit of cap flexibility, not to mention Brock Besser's going to get traded too. There's a lot of options for the Canucks if things don't work out. So I like both these moves. Danton Heinen, it sucks, honestly, because Danton Heinen's from Vancouver. He's from Langley. A lot of people were excited to see him play this year. I think as far as I heard, he was a good locker room guy. Just didn't work out. Heinen used to play with the Penguins a couple years back. So that's something where I think people are, or there's some familiarity there with the team. So that was a move. And for Desharnais, it hasn't worked out, and people got to remember he's under contract for another $2 million for next year. They signed him to a 2-year deal. So essentially what Vancouver's done, they've got rid of 2 assets that weren't working out, and it's kind of disappointing because they signed both these guys in the offseason. It's essentially the Canucks going back on a mistake they made. You give up the first-round pick, but if they re-sign Pettersson and he becomes a mainstay on your back end for the next couple of years, I think it's worth it. That's what you want. You don't want to have any defensive liabilities, and bringing in Pettersson, I think, works. The only confusing thing now is you have 3 Petterssons on the Canucks. You got Elias Pettersson, Elias Pettersson, the rookie defenseman, and now you have Marcus Pettersson. So it's a lot of Petterssons, but yeah, I think this, again, is a move that, because you got to remember, the Canucks are in playoff contention. I showed you the standings there. If you want to make the playoffs, this is the type of move they needed to do now, and I think it makes sense. And I know previously on the show I said, well, even if they make some moves, are they going to do anything in the playoffs? The way they played these last 2 games, and I might be over-exaggerating this a little bit, they look like a team that could do something. They look like they're getting, things back together. It's not all roses, though. Elias Pettersson is still not playing very well, and he's not off the hook either. Just because they traded Miller doesn't mean Pettersson can't be traded. The key date to look at is July 1st. That's when Pettersson's no movement clause kicks in. I would be willing to bet if Pettersson continues to play the way he's playing, he's not going to be a Vancouver Canuck July 1st beyond. So, my thoughts on the trades were, I think it needed to be done if you want to make the playoffs. I think the way the makeup of this team looks now, I think this is a team that could make some noise, especially if Demko's playing better. Again, Demko got the shutout last night. Kevin Lankinen's been good all season. If they can play like they've been playing the last couple games, I think they have a chance, as opposed to what looked like previously was a team that, you might make the playoffs, but they're not going to do a whole lot. I think with this mix that they have right now, I know it's only a couple games, I think they can do something. So that's my thoughts. We got a lot of questions here, guys. Sorry to keep ignoring you, but I wanted to get that rant out of the way about the Canucks trades. Let's hope the Rangers continue to lose. I mean, I'm kind of rooting for JT Miller. I did not want JT Miller to leave the team. It sucks. I know there's a lot of Canucks fans being like they traded the wrong guy, and I certainly get that with Pettersson not playing so well, but it needed to be changed. It looks like the whole team looks much more relaxed and relieved that this situation is out of the woodwork. And at the end of the day, it comes down to JT Miller. He wasn't producing. It was a distraction to the team. He had the 10-day, 10-game, was away from the team. Like, he only has himself to blame. Like, in the perfect world, the Canucks keep both players and both players are playing great. And we're not even having this discussion. There's no issue about the Canucks at all, but that's not the way that things unfolded. But I do wish JT Miller all the best, because I enjoyed watching him play here. I like his style. I like the emotion that he brings. Unfortunately, that emotion has also come with some issues in the locker room. Poor Nashville. I mean, I don't know what they're doing right now. Like, I think they need to start. They've traded some assets. I know they got rid of Carrier. They got rid of Dante Fabro, but I think they need to rebuild. Like, this is not a team. Yeah, they're winning some games here and there, but this looks like a stuck in the middle team. And even before they signed Stamkos and Marchessault, if you look at last year with the Canucks in the playoffs, the Canucks were better. They ended up winning, but I didn't think Nashville was going to go on some crazy run. So I think they're kind of at the point now where they got to start looking at their assets. What can they get back? And I think Nashville needs to start doing a rebuild. Why we care about the Rangers? Well, because that's the trade was going on. Chittle and Marcus have looked great. Want to see Mancini in the lineup. Yeah, I'm sure he'll get in at some point. I think what they don't want to do is like rush him into play, because they don't need to. The Canucks have a lot of defensive options right now. But yeah, Chittle looks great. He looks like he's fit perfectly. And there was another sort of school of thought as well, is that he didn't get the right opportunities in New York. He was playing the third line. You're not going to go past Zibanejad. You're not going to go past Trocheck. They've got their centers, laid out. With Vancouver, with Miller leaving, he has the potential to play that second line role. Now, if I'm having to guess, though, I don't think the Canucks see him as that. I think they can use him in that position if there's injuries or anything happens, but if I'm the Canucks, I'm probably still going big game hunting for another second line center. And, they were mentioning this morning, maybe Sam Bennett's an option. There's a couple UFAs that could be intriguing. There's also a couple players that could use a change of scenery. So I don't think the Canucks are done. Again, I think Brock Besser will get traded. So that we'll see what that ends up fetching. But I think the Canucks are certainly not done with some of the moves they're making. It's kind of hard to analyze the trade when we don't know what will actually happen. I think we can talk about, at the very least right now, how things are looking so far. Now, by the way, I should mention on the other end, JT Miller, first shot on goal for the Rangers, ends up scoring. I think for the Rangers, this could work out too. I think Miller can bring some energy to this team. I think Miller will play better in New York. I think, there's media pressure in New York, but it's not anything close to what it's in Vancouver. If you're in New York, someone brought this up. It's like, you can go see a Broadway show. You can watch the Knicks. You can watch, the Giants. Like, there's so many other options in New York for sports fans. This is all Vancouver has. We don't have an NBA team. It's a city that it's all Canucks all the time. That's what everyone cares about the most. The pressure is so much higher in a city like Vancouver than New York. I think Miller will thrive there because he doesn't have to worry about all that. Again, it's a distraction, so he will probably thrive there. So again, the idea is, if you let Pettersson go to free agency, well, there's two reasons. Number one, the Canucks got to turn this around right now if they want to make the playoffs, which they do, right? So that's the first thing. Their defense has been an issue all year. Prior to this Miller stuff even happening, there were a lot of question marks on the back end for Vancouver. So you make the Pettersson move, you stabilize the defense, the Canucks can essentially win more games. The second thing is, like I mentioned, if Pettersson gets a free agency, we've seen defensemen, especially veteran defensemen, ones like him that are in their prime right now, they go for a premium. They cost a lot to acquire. Look at some of the signings we've seen the last couple of years. Steve Monador, like you just look at no, sorry, not Steve Monador. Who's the guy that Seattle signed in the offseason? Guy from Florida. Why am I drawing a blank? Steve something. I don't know why I'm drawing a blank on his name right now. Brandon Montour. Steve Monador was a former NHL player. Brandon Montour, that's who I was thinking of. So again, you see them go for a premium price. It's probably better to see if you can negotiate with them ahead of time, maybe get some more term there. You don't have to bid with other teams, right? Because essentially Vancouver is only bidding with themselves between now and July 1st. So, and again, there's familiarity with the management group with Pettersson already. That's why you make the move now. There's a piece of JT in every Canuck now. It's time to go. Let's go. Yeah. And again, like if you watched that game last night, it felt like last year. It felt like a team that when they were up, they weren't worried about, burying the lead. And granted, Demko made some really big saves. I will say the power play didn't look so good last night when the Canucks had that 2-man advantage last night. But in general, like they looked like a more polished team is the best way to put it. They didn't look disorganized. It looked like everything flowed better. And I think that you're right. I think JT's effect, the positive side of it, has certainly had a radiating effect on the rest of the team. You can judge the process off trades without knowing the end result, since they are different things. Good ideas don't always yield good results, and vice versa. Exactly. We don't know the process, though, what happened in the locker room. Well, I think whatever it was, you're already seeing a difference these last couple of games with him not being there. Like, I get it. It's just an eye test, and it's only 2 games, but you can tell, like, the fact that the team doesn't have to answer questions about it anymore is just one less thing they don't have to worry about when the media is talking to them. And by the way, I don't think the media has been out of line or unfair. I've heard some narratives like that. Like, the media should just, stop butting in people's business. The media has been fairly tame in Vancouver, thanks to the way the Canucks handle their PR. If you look at teams in the past, they've been way more scrutinized than this team. I think there's a little bit of, the players have got to grow up a little bit. It's a hot hockey market. People want to know what's going on. The locker room stuff clearly was a distraction. Media's not going to ask them any of these questions if the Canucks are winning. They weren't winning, and they were losing badly in certain games. So I think that's also why, this trade needed to happen. We know American players loved him. Of course. Besser with the A maybe signing. No, I don't think so. I think they just had to put an A on someone for now, and then they'll probably reassess in the offseason. But I think Besser's gone. And here's why I think he's gone, because I think Besser And I don't blame Besser for doing this. This is your only chance to really cash in as a player. How old's Besser now? I think he's 27, 28, around there. And he's a free agent. He's 27. He's in the prime of his career. He will not sign a bigger contract than he will this offseason. If you're the Canucks and you know he's not coming back, or he's not going to take a discount, or he's going to do less term, you trade him. There's no question about it. And I like Brock Besser. I wish he could stay. He's been a big part of the team over the last couple seasons. He's a good scorer. He really figured things out last year. This year's been a bit of a down year, but I think overall he's been a positive influence on the team. But if I'm Besser, I'm going for a max deal, an 8-year deal, and I'm trying to get as much money as I can, and the Canucks just can't afford to give him that. I think if the Canucks in a perfect world would give him maybe a 5-year deal, even less than that, and maybe up the AAV in that case, especially with the cap going up. But I think Besser's looking for security, and that's where you want to cash in on a huge deal. So that's why I think Besser will get traded, because I don't think the Canucks are interested in signing a winger long-term. If you're going to sign players long-term in the prime of their career, it's got to be a defenseman like Quinn Hughes, or it's got to be a center. I think wingers, sometimes they're tough to find, especially right wingers, but I think it's harder to find. It's easier to find right wingers in free agency or drafting than it is to get a center or a really good defenseman. So I think that's where the Canucks are looking at this, saying, oh, we don't want Brock Besser for a long period of time. We would rather have something a bit shorter. And I could see from Besser's perspective being like, look, I've given my service. I deserve a JT Miller or Elias Pettersson type deal, and that's just not going to happen. So I think Brock Besser will get traded. Brock looked like he was trying to step an effort level up in JT's shoes. I would agree. I got nothing against any player. I just like the Rangers to lose every game. That's fine. Miller going to shine in New York. I agree. Yeah, Steve Monitor. My bad. I forgot about that, but forgot about him. Sturley, but would you say Connor Bedard is a bust so far as the hype he had out of the draft, or Chicago just being terrible? I would be a little hesitant. We've seen countless players have sophomore slumps. Matty Beniers is a great example. Last season with Seattle, had a really down year for him. This year, I believe he's playing better. Actually, don't know that officially. Let me go look at the Kraken stats here. I feel like Beniers is playing better. I think it's just a sophomore slump, which happens to a lot of players. Now, again, obviously, there's a lot of expectations with Bedard. He's generational talent, all that stuff. So you look at it there. Matty Beniers is currently 5th on the team. He's got 30 points in 55 games. Yeah, that could be better. But Connor Bedard, where's Bedard's stats? Let's even look how he's doing. And maybe he's dealing with some injuries. I don't know. But Chicago is not a good team. I mean, this was supposed to be a step forward for them, and they've already, traded away Taylor Hall. So Bedard has 45 points. I mean, in 52 games. Yeah, by his standards, not great. It's also a minus 24. So I think that speaks a lot to the team that they have surrounding him. Let's see how he looks next year. A lot of players dip down in their second season, so I wouldn't hit the panic button. Fantilli has been better this year. Correct. Yeah, he certainly has looked good. But I think, if I'm drafting a team right now, Connor Bedard's on that team over Adam Fantilli. They should have given it to Garland. I was surprised a bit by that too. They should have. I would agree with that, actually. So Vancouver fans have the pressure for hockey. Players like New York does for NBA, NFL players. That New York pressure has a history of mentally breaking people. Well, that's what I mean. New York's not the top ticket in town. The Knicks, the Giants, the Jets, all that stuff, that's more of a pressure cooker than what the Rangers are dealing with, right? Like the Rangers, I mean, they went 4-14 after they traded Jacob Trouba. I mean, that's terrible. And yeah, there was certainly some they got to do something or maybe fire the coach or whatever. I don't know. There was some of that, but if that's happening in Vancouver, the temperature is way higher. So that's what I think. I think Miller and also let's keep in mind too, Miller was a second line center in Vancouver. In New York, like I said, he'll be the third line guy, I would think. Maybe he's second line. Maybe he gets a bump over, I guess. No, I'm trying to even think. Let me even look at the lines right now. I think he is third line center, is he not? Either way, what kind of the point I'm getting at is there's less pressure on Miller. He was the number 2 guy. It was basically Pettersson and him. And now with New York, he's kind of number 3, I would think. Let's look at the Rangers lineup. Oh no, they have Miller on the first line. Interesting. Okay. Yeah, so Trocheck. Oh, so they put Zibanejad to the wing. I see. Okay. Well, yeah, my bad then. So I guess Miller is the guy there. But again, he's got more help, it seems, in terms of players down the middle. So I would like to see Besser in Winnipeg for the rest of the season. That Toffoli Monahan last year. I can think there could be a fit there. What would go the other way, though, would be my question for Winnipeg. Would it be draft picks? Would it be I don't know. We'll have to see what they decide to do. What do we have? Not long term. Well, if he's a rental, I could see that maybe. You get him as a rental, but that's going to still cost a lot. Rentals last year, look at some of the rentals last year. They cost a first round pick. Miller first line center. Yeah, I just noticed that right now. My bad. For some reason I thought he would be like second, like in Vancouver, but I guess they want him to be the man, and he's certainly capable of it. It's just he's got to put it all together, right? So that's part of it too. Let's have a quick look on the channel on we got a second here. Let's go look at all the stuff that my guy Taylor's been putting on Fanatics View. Again, this is why you guys got to subscribe to the channel. Lots of pre and post game stuff here. So you see Rick Tocchet, Brock Besser recap here, 12 minutes. That's the nice thing about these scrums. They're the full scrums. So they're, you're getting the full thing. You're not getting like, little highlights here. So we got Canucks stuff on here, Florida Panthers, Nashville Predators, Jeremy Roenick interview, which is great. Roenick looks like he's putting on some weight there. Joe Pavelski retiring, Rick Tocchet, Philip Cheadle, Crosby, Austin Matthews. So we're getting every team on here, basically. The Oilers, the Capitals. So this is why you got to check out Fanatics View, pre and post game content for you guys. So make sure you're subscribed. Of course, you're subscribed already if you're posting questions here, but this is another reason why you got to check it out. And actually, I'm done this. As soon as I'm done this, I'm going to go watch the full scrum because I haven't seen the whole thing yet. What else? We mentioned the standings. Let's look at some of the games that are taking place tonight. So just a couple games here. Got a rematch between the Bruins and the Rangers. Of course, they played on Saturday. The Bruins getting the win there. Can the Rangers get it done at home? That's a big question. The Oilers and the Blackhawks. Oilers played last night. They did end up winning. I still don't see a reason how the Blackhawks will win this game, but we'll have to see how that pans out. And the Canadiens played last night. They're playing the Kings. Canucks fans will be keeping an eye on that one as the Kings have not, like I said, played so great the last couple games. Let's actually go look at how they've been doing the last couple games here. But the Canadiens, like I said, played last night. Maybe a good spot to bet the Kings here, just with the fact that Montreal did play last night. So if you look at their last few games here. So, yeah, they did beat the Hurricanes, so that was a big win from there. Lost to the Lightning. Panthers beat them. Red Wings beat them. Jackets beat them. Did beat the Panthers. Penguins beat them 5-1. Kraken beat them. So it hasn't been a good couple months here other than that game they beat Vancouver back in January 16th. So the Kings have got to figure it out. And they have Doughty back too, so I don't really know what's going on there as far as why the Kings aren't winning many games. Canucks aren't tough enough. At the very least, they should have asked for Matthew Rempe and the JT Miller trade. No, they shouldn't have. You don't need a goon on the team just because they're not tough enough. We saw last night some pushback when whatchamacallit, who got hit? Linus Karlsson got speared by Miles Wood, and you saw Niels Höglander go after him. I agree this team needs a little bit more bite, but you're not getting an enforcer like Matt Rempe. That's not that would be that's like what Toronto did getting what's his name, Reeves from the Rangers. Why can't I remember his first name? You don't need like an enforcer on the team. What they should have done was kept Zadorov. I would have liked that. If they had Zadorov, there'd be a lot more punch to the Canucks. But no, there's players with some feistiness. You've got Garland. You've got some other guys like Drew O'Connor, guys that are willing to get a little bit dirty if they need to be. But yeah, if you're gonna get a tough guy, you're gonna get someone that can also score too. You're not gonna get Rempe doesn't do anything other than fight people. I agree they get in fights, but who's want to fight on the team? Sorry, Dak's been nut. Yeah, so yeah, Dakota Joshua as well is another guy that typically is more physical. You got to remember testicular cancer. He's been battling some injuries. He hasn't been in top form either. That's another reason why the Canucks have struggled this year. But I assume he'll get back to his old ways here soon. I don't think Dakota's like a guy that's like he's fallen off a cliff. I think all things considered, he's still trying to get back in the groove of things. We need a new sheriff. As far as like a tough guy, no, I think Dakota's your guy. I just think that he's got to get back into hockey playing and all that, right? Guy's been out for a while, so that's what I would argue. Yeah, Ryan Reeves. I don't know why I forgot his name. But Leafs fans were shitting on that move, and it hasn't worked out for him. How many games has Reeves played even this year for the Leafs? I don't think they even use him that much, right? Or here, let's just look at the stats. So, Ryan Reeves has played 33 games. So that's more than I expected. He is got 2 assists and he's a -2. And he's got 28 penalty minutes leading. Actually, he's not even leading the team. Jake McCabe or Oliver Ekman Larsson has more penalty minutes than he does. What about hits? Do we have hits on here? No. And they've got, they've got guys that I think Kiefer Sherwood leads the league in hits. So they have people that are willing to be physical. It's just like your tough guy thing, like Z or Miller. But Miller wasn't giving them that though. Dude, Quinn Hughes was getting beat up by Corey Perry, and there was no response, no Miller, no nothing. Miller just wasn't into it, guys. We weren't getting. That's the other thing that people need to remember about JT Miller. And again, I'm a JT Miller fan, But you have to remember that the Canucks weren't getting the JT Miller from last year. They weren't getting a guy that was stepping up and, trying to, show some emotion. In fact, it was the opposite. Go look at the LA game where, he basically coasts back and LA scores on net. Like that's, and maybe that Miller isn't going to be that same Miller in New York. Maybe he'll be a lot better, but he wasn't doing it in Vancouver. Like, I watch every game. I'm telling you, there were too many games where JT Miller was not giving it his all. You got to trade a player like that. I know I'm an absolute casual when it comes to hockey, but what does beating people up do to make the team better, scoring goals and preventing goals from being scored? It's like an emotion thing. So like, let's say a player gets like unfairly hit, or let's say, a team's down by a goal or two. It's just to like swing the momentum a bit. Like if you get like a big hit or you get into a fight or something, it can sometimes change the makeup of the game sometimes. When someone runs over PD, what do you do? Well, that's where Joshua or some of these other guys got to step up. But I don't think Matt Rempe is not the answer, though, guys, honestly. JT Miller definitely had to go. I was on Team Bo when they decided to move on Bo. Okay, so you and I will disagree. I was on Team Miller because at the time, well, I didn't know about the locker room stuff, but apparently the locker room stuff was even back then. But Bo, listen, I like Bo. He was a great member of the Canucks. I will not talk any crap on him. The only critique I will say was there wasn't a lot of leadership there, in my opinion. There were games that they lost. There wasn't a lot of, and maybe that's just Bo's style. He's not like, he's the strong, silent type, kind of like Quinn Hughes is a little bit, but I just felt that like there were too many years where the Canucks just didn't have enough bite or pushback. And I didn't see Bo doing a whole lot of that. So that's why I was more Team Miller. Miller was a little bit more emotional in a good way though. He would like fire up the team. He would get goals. He would celebrate. Like I find Bo's a little too passive for my liking. I think he's a great player, but I think I was totally Team Miller at the time. And I know people look back and they're like, well, if they kept Bo, then maybe this wouldn't have happened. Well, maybe you're not getting the production for Bo Horvat that you were getting from Miller, right? Like what's Bo Horvat's stats? Let's go look. I don't think he's hit. What's his career high in points? That's like, again, things you have to factor in here. Bo Horvat's highest season was with the Canucks in 2019 when was with the Islanders last year. He had 68 points. 68 points is a lot less than 100 points, right? He's only hit the 60 mark twice. This year he's 52 games. He's got 40, so he'll probably hit it this year. But you're getting a 60-point player instead of a 100-point player. There's a big difference there. JT ran his course. That he did. That was it, basically. Keep the questions coming, everyone. Canucks related or not, doesn't matter. This is a hockey show. It's not a Canucks show, but we've got to talk a little Canucks with everything that's kind of going on right now. Let's look at some other news that's going on in the NHL at the moment. Four Nations is coming up next week. We'll definitely have to look into that a little bit. Yeah. Let's see some other stuff that's going on. Yeah, not a whole lot. Ovechkin scoring goal 878 yesterday. So, 17 goals off. If you have a quick look here. 878. Very impressive. Ovechkin's been one of my favorite players of all time. In fact, it's maybe blasphemy, but I was always Team Ovechkin over Team Crosby. I just, again, same sort of thing. Like Ovechkin, great personality, flashy scorer, good player, took a ton of shit. How many years were people talking about how Ovechkin couldn't get it done, couldn't get over the hump? Meanwhile, he didn't have the type of talent that Sidney Crosby had in Pittsburgh. I mean, Crosby had Letang and Malkin and so many other really good players throughout his career. Ovechkin, you had your Nick Backstrom and a few other guys that certainly contributed, but Ovechkin did a lot of this on his own, and that's why they won the cup a couple years back. And to see him have success at his age right now, and the Capitals doing so well, is just awesome to see. And I don't know how people can't root for that. Ovechkin's awesome. He's going to go down as maybe one of my favorite players of all time. I love to see the fact that he's still playing well. And how old is he? He's like almost 40, isn't he? Or is he 40? He's 39. He'll be 40 in September. Pretty incredible that he's still doing it at this age. When it's all said and done, who will end up being the better group of brothers, the Hughes or the Stalls? Ooh. I mean, it's looking like the Hughes right now. I'd have to go back and look at the Stalls stats from back then, but I mean, Quinn Hughes looks like one of the best defensemen of all time. I mean, he might hit 100 points this year. He is, by the way, he has been sitting out the last couple of games. We'll see if he ends up playing in San Jose tomorrow night. But you look at Quinn Hughes right now, he's already at 59 points. Quinn Hughes has more points than Bo Horvat. He got 92 points last year. Even him missing a few games, he'll probably still hit 100 points. It's incredible. Yeah, he is. And then Jack, I mean, what's Jack up to this year? I feel like I don't hear too much about him just because on the other side here. So he's got 40 points. Wow, it's crazy that Quinn has more points than Jack, and they played and Quinn's played less games. Just crazy. Actually, no, sorry. I take that back. Jack has 60. I was looking at the wrong thing there. Jack has 63 points. Quinn has 59, but Quinn's played less games. So, I mean, really, like, Quinn's not that far behind. So, yeah, Jack Hughes, quite the talent. Very cool to see. Team Ovi all the way, me too. Canucks win in the long run. Watch the New York Rangers miss the playoffs and start to break down as the dressing room. Well, here's the other thing, Sean, that you know you got to note. They have a number of older players signed to long-term contracts. Like, if they're able to get rid of Zibanejad in the offseason, that's a big win for them because they're just cap strap. I mean, let's go look at their roster right now on Puckpedia. Like, this, you know, I don't know if this is the best move possible, them getting Miller, because they might make the playoffs, but I mean, they don't look like the team that was there last year. And I believe last year too, I was reading some stats here, like they were kind of expected to have a regression. So yeah, if we look at the Rangers right now, you look at their cap situation, as I'm trying to share this right here. Computer's going slow. Sorry, guys. So if you look at it there, so yeah, you got Miller signed long-term. You got Zibanejad signed long-term. You got Panarin for another season at 11.6. Chris Kreider signed for a couple more years. Trocheck signed for a while, although Trocheck's had a pretty good number. Yeah, so that's what I mean. Adam Fox is locked up, and they got to figure out their defense because, like, obviously Lindgren and Keandre Miller are up. They're going to get raises, I would think. So Sturkin's signed, and he'll have a big contract. I just realized Jonathan Quick's going to be a UFA next year. So that's what I mean. And, like, as far as their overview, okay, so I guess they have $9 million in cap space. I'm assuming that's because also they have, okay, so they have a bit of cap room here. But what I'm saying is that, like, you just have a lot of players that are older. Like, look at the ages here: 33, 31. Panarin's 33, Zibanejad's 31, Trocheck's 31. Like, a good makeup of a team is where you have a mix of kind of old and young players too, right? So they don't really have a whole lot of that. Their defense is a bit younger, but their forward's a little too heavy in the 30s, in my opinion. Still hard for me to believe how well Washington is playing. Well, I think what I've kind of figured out, and I think a lot of people have too, is that I think last year they had like some injuries. Maybe they didn't have the right makeup. Also, I don't think Darcy Kemper played that well in net. They're getting good goaltending from Logan Thompson. So it's been a couple like little things. And then I think Spencer Carberry, just with having I guess he had a full season last year, but to have this team for another year, I think they've really found their groove. I think part of it is just that they are, I think players are just playing better. That's really what it boils down to. So happy JT Miller's gone. I mean, you missed the 100 points, but, you know, again, I'll say it again, like the Canucks were not getting the JT Miller they had last season. So you were essentially getting like a, third line player, and to get rid of him and get rid of that cap space was good. Do you think Bobby Orr was greater? I didn't say that Bobby Orr or that Quinn Hughes is better than Bobby Orr. Quinn Hughes has still got a lot left in his career. Yeah, Bobby Orr is probably the best defenseman of all time. And then, Quinn Hughes has the potential to be that, I think. Yeah. Well, Quinn Hughes isn't a baby. How old is he? He's what, 24? How old's Quinn Hughes? He is 25. So, it's not like he's 19, but yeah, I get. JT Miller's not net 100-point player. He cost the team 30, 40 goals. This season, 100%. I agree with you. Yes, absolutely. And, there's not a guarantee. Like, how many more seasons can he even produce 100 points? Let's say he goes to New York and he's back to his old self. How long does that realistically last for? Maybe 2 seasons, right? Usually when players get in their, mid-30s, they start to regress. And that's where, it's... And I think the issue, too, with Miller is, like, he doesn't play good defense. So that's another thing. Like, at least, as much as Pettersson's getting a lot of flack, his defensive numbers are not that bad, but he obviously has to step up and score. I'm telling you guys this right now. If Elias Pettersson, and I got his jersey back there, my son's favorite player, I hope it works out, but the way he's playing right now, he is going to get traded. I will bet money on that he gets traded before July 1st, because they're not going to sit back and just hope for something to happen. Now, let's dig into this a little bit quickly, and I want to get your guys' take on this. So there's been some thoughts that Pettersson has been dealing with an injury for a while, and that they haven't properly figured it out. This is what I would say to those critics. Because at first I thought maybe that is the case because he's definitely slower. He doesn't have the same jump he used to have from a couple of years ago. Like something must be going on here. Do you not think the Canucks, after investing so much money into Elias Pettersson, do you not think they get the best doctors? They went to all these lengths to make sure Demko was good to go. And Demko's a $5 million. Demko's one of the best bargain goaltending, contracts in the league right now, considering what he's giving you. When Demko's at his best, he's giving you Vezina caliber goaltending at $5 million a season. That is maybe one of the best contracts in the league. And so when he has all these knee issues and all this different stuff, they fired the goaltending coach, essentially. Ian Clark is no longer, I guess he's like a scout now. I think part of that was, I think they felt that Clark was overworking Demko in practice and doing all this different stuff. Although the Canucks themselves have to blame a bit for Demko too, with overplaying him when they didn't need to play him that much, right? They had Casey DeSmith last year. He should have got more games. So there's that. But you saw the Canucks go to all these different lengths to try and get Demko the best doctors and all that stuff. Would they not do the same thing with Pettersson? He may be dealing with an injury. I think every player is dealing with something, right? Like you never get through a season that's completely unscathed. But I have to think that they've looked at that option and there's no, it's not bad enough where he should be playing the way he's playing. So if it's not like a major injury that he's not dealing with or whatever, then you got to say, is he ever going to be the player he used to be? Maybe his knees are just cooked. I don't know. Like I'm not a doctor. I'm here talking hockey on this show, but like, I do wonder, like I want to know what you guys think, because that's all the Pettersson defenders. That's essentially what they're saying, is that he should be resting. He should be getting time off. They should treat this injury properly. But you have to think the Canucks would do that. I know they're trying to get in the playoffs, but they're willing to sit Quinn Hughes out. They're willing to give JT Miller a 10-game absence. Why wouldn't they do the same for Pettersson if it was really an injury? So I don't think it is an injury. Do I think he's dealing with something? Yes, but I don't think that's the reason he's not playing well. I worry a bit that this could be something like permanent, that he's never going to be the same player. And that's where you'd have to trade him, because some team would take that risk and hope that he turns around. But I really don't know. But all I know right now is if you look at the data right now, what Pettersson's doing, his shot, all this different stuff, he is playing like a third line center, not a first line center. And you cannot be paying a third line center $11.6 million. So, and that's the thing. And yes, Canucks, if you trade Pettersson, it's tough. 26-year-old, center who's put up 100 points. You're not going to get full value back for him, just like we saw with Miller. I mean, Pettersson, I think, would fetch a better return than JT Miller would. But again, what it comes down to at the end of the day is cap space. If they can use that 11.6 elsewhere, they could get a couple different players probably for that. Then at least it's better than what they got now. But what you don't want to have is a player that has a no movement clause and is playing like crap, and you're stuck in the contract. That's what they had with Oliver Ekman-Larsson. That's what they've had with Louis Eriksson when he was with the Canucks. They could never trade him. Now, granted, I don't think Jim Benning was capable of making a good trade. He never made a good one in his entire tenure with the Canucks, other than maybe JT Miller. That's probably his only good trade that he's done, and signing Demko to that contract. But that's what I worry about, is that like on the best end of the scale, Pettersson figures it out. He figures this out between now and July 1st, and he ends up being this great player that we saw before. That's the best case scenario. The worst case scenario is it's Louis Eriksson 2.0. And this is a player who is not playing up to his level, and he's giving you a headache with the salary cap. So let's hear what you guys think. Different equipment and training, had those been available to number 4, had blown out his own stats. Talking about Bobby Orr, yes. Trade PD to get Miller back. Not happening. Maybe it's arthritic and won't take the medicine side effects. I don't know, but you got to try something here, because he doesn't look the same. Like, it's like basically since the All-Star game last year, Pettersson has not looked like the same player. I think I already know the answer, but if you were drafting a D for your franchise right now, would you take Hughes, Werenski, or Makar? Hughes. Hughes is a lot better than Cale Makar, in my opinion. And that's not to say Makar's not a great defenseman. He's awesome, but I think Hughes has shown over these last couple seasons that he is a level above Cale Makar. Not by a ton, but like, you take Hughes out of the Canucks lineup with the roster they had prior to these trades, Canucks are nowhere near the playoffs, in my opinion. I mean, there were games when Hughes was out or he wasn't playing his best and they looked terrible and they were getting blown out. I think with Cale Makar to the Avalanche lineup, it's a big hole, but not as big as Quinn Hughes. Werenski certainly too. I mean, he's having an amazing season. Shout out to my guy Troy, who I'll try and get back on the show next week, our Columbus Blue Jackets guy. But yeah, Werenski's right up there too. I think Werenski's in that Makar category for sure. Hughes, no doubt. Exactly. I agree. I think PD is healthy. He just needs to get his confidence back. But how long are you going to wait? Like, again, this is from basically this time last year that PD started playing bad. He already said tendonitis. I know, but it's like, what's the solution there? Like, there is no cure for it, right? Is the idea. So, like, you'd have to think, like, I can't imagine the Canucks are not, like, looking at every option for this, right? A lot of people shit on the Canucks trade return. I thought they did quite well for the situation. The Miller contract has buyout written all over it. That's exactly it. Like, even when they signed the contract a couple years back, people were like, why did they double down on Miller, like, for this much of a contract? Like, that, signing players that have defensive liabilities like Miller does is never a good idea. Yeah, again, cap space is so valuable. They could change this entire team, like, however they want. They could, like I said, they could get a Miller caliber player if they trade a Besser, or they, again, I'm trying to even think the cap space situation for the Canucks right now. Like I said, the Rangers have $9 million in cap space. What do the Canucks have? Canucks have a few. Because again, getting Desharnais' contracts off the books is good. Canucks have $7 million in cap space. 2.6, and they've been doing a good job of accruing cap space this year too. That's another thing the last regime did not do. They were always, in cap issues. Like, it's just so crazy. And I hate to keep crapping on him, but like, Jim Benning's tenure was one of the worst in Canucks history, like as far as general management. Like, I as much as this regime, Alvin and Rutherford, have made a lot of mistakes. Someone had it the other day on Twitter about all the players that have not panned out. Actually, let me go see if I can find that tweet. But they've at least made up for it. Like, hey, Danton Heinen and Vinny Desharnais didn't work this year. Rather than us stick with it, we're going to trade them. Because I think both Heinen and, I know Desharnais did, but I think Heinen had multiple years on his contract too. Defense on the Canucks is improved. Phillip will be perfect 2-3 center. As a perfect 2-3 center. Cheadle, yes. Canucks will have 12.6 at the deadline. Exactly. That's a value. And at the very least, even if they can't get someone, you maybe take on something, like a bad contract or something if they need to, and get some picks and then use that later in the offseason. Like, it's just amazing how many options the Canucks have now when, like, I remember, like, even just a couple of years ago, the OEL contract and all this stuff, it's like they can't do anything. And now they can. I predict Vancouver catches and passes both Calgary and Los Angeles. I wouldn't have said this last week. I will say this week. If you watch the game last night, if you watch even the Dallas game they lost on Friday, 5-2, they look good in that game. Like, there's something different. Like, I think, honestly, Rutherford coming out, and we did this on the show last week, talking about how Rutherford was like, hey, we might blow this up. I don't know what that did, but the team just looks different. It's totally different right now. So, yeah, it's... and they've got prospects in the pool. That was another thing that Jim Benning kept trading away their first-round picks or trading away prospects. They traded away, what's his name? The guy for Florida who's playing really well. Gustav Forsling. They gave up on him for a guy, and I think they got Adam Clendenning in that trade, and they ended up trading him like shortly after that. So, sorry, that was if they dropped Soucy. Yeah, and I'm hoping Soucy will turn it around. Remember, I don't know what they're doing with this posting Soucy's available and all this stuff, because like he's got a no trade clause. Like, he's gonna have some say in where he goes. Maybe Vegas too, they suck now. Yeah, Vegas is not playing so great as well, but I think they will catch the Kings. I've never been that sold on the Kings. There was a couple teams early in the year. Los Angeles was one of them. Calgary was one of them, where you kind of knew they weren't going to maintain this, and I think LA is one of them. Because I just don't see, like, they haven't, like, they lost Pierre-Luc Dubois. They didn't really replace him, although he wasn't playing well either. They haven't really like added any like big assets. I think what they've been a beneficiary of is some pretty good goaltending this season, right? Kemper's actually playing well for LA, which wasn't something I thought could have happened. So there we go. Okay, guys, let's get like 2 more questions in here and then we'll take off. Again, really appreciate you guys tuning in. We do the show every Wednesday, 12 p.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. I would like to keep Soucy for the depth. I knew he'd have a good game. I believe in him. I hope he works out too. I like Soucy. I think he's a big guy. He's physical. He was good last year. He's been good on every team he's been on, Seattle, Minnesota. So I don't know what happened earlier this year. I don't know if he had an injury or whatever, but I would like to see them try and make it work. Wolf is 1-3 in his last 4 ever since I put a bet on him to win the Calder. So that's nice. There we go. Too much turnover is not good. Yeah. I mean, I don't want them to completely turn this team over, but I think there's 2 other shoes to drop. One is Besser and then the other one's Pettersson. And like I said, I hope Pettersson works out. When Pettersson was at his best, he was fun to watch. Canucks have not had a flashy, like really good player like him basically since like maybe the Sedins or Bure. I mean, it's been a while since they've had a player that's like really captured the city the way that Elias Pettersson has. And I wish him well. But also, like, they've really done everything to cater to him as much as they can. They traded, they brought in Kuzmenko. That didn't work out. They brought in Mikheyev. That didn't work out. They signed Jake DeBrusk, who, by the way, scored last night. Good to see him get back in the good graces as well. DeBrusk is a good signing in the sense that he brings a lot of speed. I think Jake DeBrusk, I actually wanted to check this quickly before we go. I believe Jake DeBrusk has more points. Well, I know he has more points than Elias Lindholm, which obviously Lindholm left Vancouver to go to Boston. So DeBrusk has 33 points. What is Boston? Boston Bruins have Lindholm is at 28. So DeBrusk's better. What's Jake Getzel at for Tampa Bay? I mean, Tampa's, they're kind of hit or miss this year. I don't know what's going on with them, but what's Getzel at this year? I'm willing to bet he has more points, but still I'm curious to see how much. So he's got 51. So actually he is a lot more ahead of he's a lot more ahead of Jake DeBrusk. So I was curious about that because at one point I know that DeBrusk had more points. Now what about goals? Jake has 19 goals. Getzel has 26. Okay, so there's a bit of a gap there. DeBust. He's not DeBust. I think DeBrusk has played fine. I mean, he hasn't lit the world on fire, but I think he's a capable winger that brings some speed, and I think in certain stretches he plays very well. So I don't. And what's he at cap wise? He's barely at anything. What, like 5 million? I think 6 million. DeBrusk is at 5.5. That's a very reasonable number for him, and you've got him locked up for a while. Again, that's the other half of this thing. If you have good cap management, the cap management teams that are good at that, they typically do quite well. Let's get 2 more questions, guys, and then we'll get out of here. What's on your mind, guys? Anything else going on in the hockey world? Four Nations, we'll be talking that next week. And then a week after, I will not be here, unfortunately. I'm going to be covering a UFC event. So I'll be away in 2 weeks because that's my day job. Is I'm an MMA reporter for some of you who aren't familiar with that. So I'll be away in 2 weeks, but or maybe we do the show on Tuesday. I don't know. I'll figure something out. I think maybe I'll still try and do the show. We'll see, but maybe just do it a different day. All right, looks like we don't have much going on. We're at the top of the hour, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. My name is James Lynch. I do the show every week. Make sure you hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit that notification bell. Really helps out this channel big time. I'll be back next week. We'll see how things look with the Rangers, the Canucks, everyone else. Appreciate you tuning in. This is the Fanatics View Hockey Show. I'll see you guys next week. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I'll talk to you guys soon.